What's up, everyone? It's Isaac Smolden, the production manager here at my house. Just giving everyone a heads up that this episode is part one of a 3-part episode series that we conducted with Josh Fryfogle for Diagnonsense. So make sure you're tuning in to the next 2 episodes of this series as well. We're going to be covering a wide array of topics. And just because Josh is coming in and we're going to get into the mud and weeds on some of these topics of conversation, I am going to just give everyone a quick disclaimer to say that the views expressed in this podcast by any member of any of these episodes do not necessarily reflect the views of Matsu Youth Housing or its management. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the show.
90% of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not. It
Gets the people going.
You're now listening to Diagnonsense.
Look at all this damage!
With Justin Pendergrass and Kurt Honak.
You are a sad, strange little man.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
Well, so Josh and Kurt are both in the same room with a mic in front of them, so I just got an email from the FBI that said I'm not allowed to fly on planes anymore. It's
Is that real? I can't tell.
Kurt's
Wouldn't
like,
surprise me.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't surprise me.
Kurt, you should pass
this-
Josh's headphones.
Are we joking? I can't tell anymore.
Kurt's worried all of a sudden.
That's how you know the cognitive dissonance is hit full. The
Okay.
spectrum is like, I can't tell if that's a joke or not.
I think he wasn't allowed to fly on planes before that. He's just
Okay.
trying to find
Okay.
another excuse.
Oh, gotcha.
Because if we Google him,
Okay.
yeah, it's
Oh,
not.
okay.
Kurt
I
told
wasn't
me he
aware of
was
that.
flying to Fairbanks last week. I was surprised. I was like, they still let you on airplanes, Kurt? Like, went to the airport 4 hours early so he could make it through TSA in 2.
When objective science becomes so controversial that I guess I don't know if that's happened to
Big
anybody
Pharma's
yet,
going to
but
stop him from being on planes.
I don't know if that's happened yet where people have, I'm sure it has. I mean, I went to the Medical Freedom Symposium just to see what that was about, and kind of interesting, some of the things that I was hearing.
Well, Pfizer has straight up admitted, that they had no research to suggest or prove. They didn't even do any research to determine if the vaccine stopped transmission.
That's a catchword. Well, okay. That's the show, everyone. Thanks. Justin, you want to wrap it up for us really quick?
Thanks for having me.
Diagnonsense.
No, that's the show. We're done. Actually, I need you to do the outro.
It seems like it's all you can talk about.
Now, here's the thing. I'm not making that claim, because that would be against YouTube's policies.
Right.
And if this ends up on YouTube,
right.
what I'm saying is that they are saying that, and I'm confused because why would Pfizer be putting out misinformation this late in the game?
Well, I mean, it took how many decades for the serotonin hypothesis to be like disproved? So I don't know. I mean,
I'm sweating.
I mean,
bullets over here.
they're working in decades. We're working in the months and years where our lives are affected, and then I guess they've got decades-long plans for...
Eugenics has always been big picture.
Right.
When you think about it.
Now we're going back to eugenics. It's going to be like a Hitler to Cocoa Puff things again.
Have fun editing, Isaac.
Okay. Justin, can you just bring us into this? Because I feel like we.
I didn't know that was the soft open. Is
think
that what we were
I
doing?
think that's just the
hard
soft open. Yeah, it's more like a hard open.
That was a hard
We're
open.
That was a real. Thank you guys for tuning into Diagnonsense. I'm your host, Justin Pendergrass, here with my co-host, Kurt Honak. How you doing, Kurt?
Doing awesome.
Good to see you, man. We have a guest again. We're here with Josh Fryfogle for a second time.
back. Yay.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
So much fun the last time. We just had to do it again.
We just
in a
had
month.
so much that we wanted to talk about, and we only had 30 minutes last time. So this time we're going to bother you for longer.
Yeah, but we're going to do housekeeping really quick.
No.
I actually do have something that's important because last week on Redemption, we said my voice was going to be back on Wednesday or Friday, and then we ended up having some last-minute reschedule stuff to do. So it's actually going to be not this Friday when this releases, the next Friday. That's like the 28th. That's going to be the first episode of My Voice. So I did have to announce that. Also, the Radiothon that we're doing in partnership with Ohana Media Group, that's on November 4th. We're going to be doing a broadcast out of the recording studio on November 4th from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. All proceeds go into my house, so make sure you're tuning into that if you're local out here in the Valley. Okay. See? That's important stuff. This is what you this is what you miss.
Most of that was
when-
just so you could talk.
Well, all right, I'll shut up now.
Please.
I'm done.
Please, I'm begging you.
Okay.
So, Josh, how are things?
You know, things are really good, all things considered. How about you?
Things are good. I'm working for myself now, so it's
Yeah,
a little bit of a transition, but I'm enjoying it.
You were telling me about that last time. That's very exciting. But do you miss being at my house every day?
I miss the people, and I don't necessarily always miss the chaos. Sometimes I do because I get a little bored in between. Like I'm sitting at home just mixing a bunch of stuff right now, and I find myself like looking up and being like, "Man, nothing's happened. Like, am I missing something?"
There's not like an active crisis.
And like it's crazy because a couple of people have reached out to me since I've left, like young people that I've worked with, and I leave my phone downstairs in the studio when I go upstairs to go to bed now, and it's actually very peaceful. And it's not that I don't want to be there for these people. It's just that I need that space and I need to create my environment again.
I've thought about this because I've seen over the years a lot of people go through these roles that you guys are both in with advising clients. What's the name of that position?
Case management.
Case management. And I've often thought, that must be real challenging for the case manager to have so much trauma and granted, it's not happening directly to you, but it's all you're getting all day from all these people, and you're having to absorb and empathize. That must be a real challenge.
It can be very tiring if we don't know really where to put it, but Michelle's put some things into place since, she started to recognize that, we have a counselor that comes in here on Wednesdays now and sits with our team and directly talks with our team to kind of unpack some of those things. And that's a great thing. I didn't leave because I was I was done with the position. I left because I felt my calling was shifting into what I've wanted to do my entire life. So when I got to do that, it was really cool. I'm still here. I'm still a person that loves this organization. I still love everything that they do. I still, I wouldn't have left if, I didn't know that the people here could handle it. And, Michelle's got a rock solid team. Kurt's here, Mike, Kira, all those people are still here holding the bag.
Yep.
And, not that they put that pressure on me, but, you kind of put it on yourself, right?
Right.
So when I was ready to go, I was tired.
Sure.
I was kind of burnt out, to be honest. It's just, it's a lot. And then, I'm dealing with my own mental health stuff, and I wasn't finding any relief in that. And it's just because I was constantly in crisis, because this is just the field that it is, and they're doing a lot of stuff to try to mitigate that and work around it. And I love that they're doing that. I just needed to take a step away from me. And it was the perfect time for myself and my wife and me to really just say, okay, if I'm going to do music, if I'm going to build this ministry to the place that I want it to be, I have to do it now or I never will. And it was a terrifying leap. I'm still,
I bet.
I was talking to Isaac about some of it
So
today.
Before we were recording, we were just having that conversation. It's interesting on this subject. Speaking of our licensed therapist, psychologist that comes in every Wednesday, I was actually shout out to Richard. I was talking to Richard last Wednesday because I've been working one-on-one with a couple clients, kind of in not really a case manager role, but just like a person-to-person interaction role, and allowing them to kind of get some stuff off their chest and giving them an opportunity to talk about, kind of just whatever they want. And Richard and I were having this conversation about this psychological, not phenomenon, maybe it is a phenomenon, I don't know what you'd call it, where he, I was telling him about an interaction, and he said, well, what did you feel in that interaction? I was like, maybe I was a little uncomfortable. Like I was kind of confused. I was perplexed. And what he said is when you in that role of talking to someone who's kind of unloading some trauma or dealing with some emotional scarring, whatever you're feeling in that moment is actually a great insight into what that individual is feeling while they're sharing that information or while they're working through their trauma. And so not going to pretend that like I'm a case manager, because I'm not. And I mean, you look at like when Justin was here, or like with Mike and now Brian, who's back there, they're kind of getting that, every day, all day, where they're sitting down with people. And it's not always people just unloading their trauma on our case managers. Like sometimes it's just a quote unquote normal conversation, but I can definitely see how that wears on you. Like if you're thinking that every time we're having an interaction like that and we're having these super, at-risk, vulnerable people come in and who are feeling these feelings, and there's something in our brains, something with our empathy that makes us feel those same feelings. I mean, it's like being almost going through that trauma every day yourself from like an emotional standpoint, not like a physical, not like a cognitive, like logical standpoint, but just emotionally what you're feeling if you have people that are coming in and unloading on you. Like, and Justin's definitely right with the fact that Michelle and the organization has done a great job building things up around as kind of a network for our staff to be able to deal with that and feel supported through that.
I would think it's probably even more so with young clients. Like if you were dealing with adults, you would not also be dealing with teenage angst. So you're dealing with these kids that have every right to go through what teenagers go through, and a lot of the symptoms of that are mirrored in trauma response from anyone, So the kid, it's both. And how do you decide, which one is which? Is the client just being a teenager, or is this indicative of a problem above and beyond teenage hormones?
I think that it's a mixture at that point in their life, because they're still, learning that process of being a young adult, but also bad behaviors, and having to unlearn those behaviors that really created the environment they were in, or they lived in an environment where they had to learn these behaviors to survive. And I think that a lot of the times it's like, we have to set a lot of boundaries with young people that are learning these things as they're growing, and having to learn what your boundaries are in the process of setting boundaries and building that environment that is really healthy for them, and in providing that space for them to, suck a little bit,
Right.
and get a little flustered and angry, but holding them accountable for that. And this isn't how we treat people.
Right.
And teaching them how, it's like, ironing out the edges and smoothing the roughness.
I mean, to me, that's why peer support is so effective, because when you're onboarding people for this kind of work, right, it's like you kind of want to gauge where their life experience is, because with peer supports, I think the technical term is vicarious traumatization. And I
knew
read
Kurt would know what I was talking about.
Yeah,
Even if I didn't know how to say it.
I read Trauma and Recovery, I think Judith Herman, and talking about people working with Holocaust survivors and how they were talking to them. And then then it becomes like, well, this happened to this person in this scenario, but then they think about their lives and they think about, well, if that happened in their world, actually that could happen in my world,
Right.
to me. And so that's like, it's like mind blowing when they're working with them. And so the peer support is nice, because the peer support can come in and say, where they've experienced that, they've kind of had that trauma actually builds that resiliency to where it's like, oh, I survived this already. Like I went through this. I know how this goes. And so it allows them to be a lot more, I would say, robust in how they respond to crisis. And that's another reason I really love that peer support model, is just showing that, hey, we've got people that have gone through this, that have survived this,
Yeah.
that know what the next steps are intuitively. And we don't have to put that through a clinical process to get that rolling.
Right,
So,
and it gives that that peace of mind too to the young person in the crisis as well, thinking I can make it out if this guy made it out.
Right.
It provides like a it's like looking in a mirror and seeing the future.
Right.
And I think that's what's really interesting about the peer support stuff. The case management team directly in here, they are peers. They're not just case management. They're people who've experienced these hardships, these struggles, and they've come out of them on the other side and are now using those skills they've learned to not only develop their careers in a different direction, but help the young people who are growing too. So I think that what Michelle's doing for the staff and helping them through those things, I definitely did not leave angry. I left with a lot of hope and a lot of encouragement from this team and a lot of direction. And I could not be the artist that I am today without the trainings and the people that are around me here.
It's going to affect all of your relationships going forward.
I learned how to be me in this organization. I learned how to love me here. I learned how to set boundaries. I learned how to be, proud of my story and how, just because life happened to me doesn't mean that life can't happen for me, and get me moving forward kind of thing. So, yeah, it's different. It's awesome, but it's stressful. It's scary.
when Isaac was talking earlier, he was talking about, how you pick, and then Kurt named it vicarious something another.
Vicarious traumatization, I believe, is the terms that Judith Herman used.
That's a good term, good term of art at least.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of the concept of microexpressions. Are you guys familiar with microexpressions?
I'll explain it for people who don't.
I've heard.
But you've got it. Yeah, you've got it.
I've heard microaggression.
If there's
I don't know if I've heard microexpression.
Yeah, just the audience.
Microexpressions are actually verifiable and real, whereas microaggressions are total garbage.
I'm still learning. These are all new.
Microaggression is like political correctness. It's like,
Josh,
I'm pushing that direction, Isaac. But with micro expressions, basically, we all do these very small expressions with our face and our body language that's not immediately visible. Sometimes it happens in a microsecond. But you can be trained, if you know what to look for, you can be trained to see them. But otherwise, I think we all kind of pick up on them subconsciously.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're subconsciously, and then so people say, I'm very intuitive or I'm very empathetic. Well, really, you're just very observant. You're just noticing things subconsciously, and your conscious mind is able to tap into it. Whereas someone who is less observant, their subconscious just isn't interacting as directly with their conscious mind. So it's not really. I mean, what is empathy? What is intuition? It's something that's in the past, maybe it was mystical, right? Like it's some spiritual level, but really there's a verifiable, scientific, measurable reality that when you meet someone and you can tell they don't like you, but you couldn't tell anyone why you felt that way. It's because they're sending signals to you that you associate with being unliked. Like maybe it's just this momentary squint of the eyes that you've only seen from people in the past who didn't like you. And you see it for half a second or a fraction of a second, and from that point forward, and vice versa, someone that really likes you, you can always tell when someone connects with you.
Yeah.
Right? You can feel it. Like, oh, that person actually accepted me as a person. Well, they're sending signals to you with these micro expressions.
Yeah.
And that's how we do it. But we just don't think about it. So that's fascinating to me.
It's interesting on the subject of vicarious traumatization too, Kurt, when you're talking about how, so on one hand, the person that you're working with can look at you as someone who has gone through a similar experience and go, I could make it through as well. But then also the person that they are confiding in, that person, what you're saying is subconsciously, they don't have that trigger where they're like, well, if that can happen to this person, that can happen to me. Their line of thinking is, oh, that happened to me and I made it through and I'm fine.
Right.
So they're not taking on that same level of nervousness or apprehension when they're in that scenario with that individual, which Which is, I mean, like
Again,
you said, that's
right.
a great reason why the peer support,
Right.
the peer
Well, and that could be expressed in
peer-to-peers
the
work so well.
in the body language that you're talking about, Josh, but also could be just expressed in their general sense of the attitude and the right of the provider, and
It could be overt.
Could be overt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that those are directly connected to like the good triggers and the bad triggers? Have we talked about that before? Like when somebody's going through those situations and they're sharing with you, you are triggered as somebody who's experienced some of those things. But there's a difference between having a good trigger and a bad trigger. Some good triggers are what you're going to use to help you like grow through that. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
and I don't. Maybe this isn't the right terminology because I don't read.
I think I get what you're
books
saying.
about
Though.
everything.
Is it like well, and,
But-
and
But,
But
you
then
can
there's the bad ones.
vicariously.
Yeah,
get the
I'm reading through Kurt. He's
Yes.
telepathically telling me about these books right
Uh-oh.
now.
There we go. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I think, I that's not to say that people can't be triggered by trauma. I think one of the realizations for people that are service providers and do therapeutic work is that on the therapists and to ethically, for them to be ethical, they have to advocate for the systems that they work inside of. I think that's when they talk about, handling somebody ethically, it's like, well, the apparatus you're working within and the system you should be advocating to, so that, your client isn't traumatized when the system itself is not at a fundamental level isn't cohesive to like a good outcome, right? Let's say.
Well, I was more so talking about like the therapist being, like hypothetically,
Yeah.
the therapist being triggered by something a client
Yeah.
says. Like if the therapist is a rape survivor and they're working with someone who's a rape survivor,
Right.
there's triggering moments in that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. But and not saying that there's any good triggers
Right,
in
right.
that situation.
You mean
but
constructive.
Right.
There
are healthy moments where you will be triggered because you're needing to learn how to deal with it. I was working with a young person who was having a really hard time because they saw somebody using their needle for their diabetes. They have to take their needle shots every day, and it triggered them.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, now I'm thinking about this, and this. And I was like, yeah, but you have to learn how to see that in this environment because there are people with diabetes. You're going to see that.
Yeah.
Right.
You're going to have to learn how to reassociate that in your life with something different. And I'm not trying to go all like counselor on it, but that's just the truth. There are going to be moments in your life where you're going to see things that give you that huge red flag. And maybe you don't unpack them all right in the moment, right? Like,
Right.
I was beat up at a Burger King. I'm not going to Burger King ever in my life. And every time I have to take the long way home. Like,
Right.
Burger King's a D-tier fast food restaurant anyway. Don't go to Burger King. Hot take.
I didn't say they
my
were
hot
there
take.
eating. I said they were beat up there.
Oh, well,
By the Hamburglar, he was there. He was mad that you were at Burger King.
it was corporate sponsorship the whole time.
Oh God. Oh my gosh.
But you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
So I just think that that's just the continuing the conversation. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, well, and using those moments to be constructive in your own mental health journey, I think it probably also depends on where you're at in your process.
Of course.
Like you can't expect someone to immediately associate, for example, like if we're on needles, like if it's 2 weeks after they're coming out of their trauma, maybe that individual needs a little more time. I think the key aspect is having a support network around you for when you have those moments that are that do trigger trauma, that you're able to talk through them with someone, and that's where I feel like you find that constructive aspect of that is having the network around and talking through it. Because if you're just internalizing all of that, that is only adding on to that mental scar in a way. I think for the vast majority of people, maybe there's a couple individuals that are able to be their own therapist and go back and forth and rationalize things in their head. But I think for the majority of us that need connection, I mean, you have to have a support network in place and be working through that
Well, and
for
I
the
don't.
rest of your life.
I wasn't meaning like, you break your leg and you got to start walking tomorrow.
Right.
If you're not walking tomorrow, you're actually hindering your growth. No, I was meaning so like, if you're letting something from 6 years ago affect you that vastly, then maybe you should reevaluate and start allowing those triggers to happen so that you can grow through them. Because, I don't find myself growing when I'm not uncomfortable.
Yeah, when you're not challenging yourself.
Right. If I'm comfortable, I stay in that spot, right? Because it's comfortable, right? I got pillows. I got my feet up, But if I'm uncomfortable, like if the couch is made of rock, I got to make some changes. I can't just lounge there all day. My back's gonna hurt.
Well, but not to get all like society. We live in a society, but our
do,
society, but our society nowadays does breed. I mean, we have sacrificed a lot of, personal. You could talk about it from a personal privacy standpoint, from a work standpoint. We've sacrificed a lot to put convenience at the top of our priority chart when it comes to, you look at how we get our groceries. Like you have groceries that can be delivered to your door. You have food that can be delivered to your door. You have packages of anything in the world that you could possibly want. Within reason that
Jeffrey
can be delivered
Bezos.
to your
Jeffrey Bezos.
insert the Bo Burnham song. but I mean, we're kind of breeding that you can, hey, it's okay to lock yourself in your house and just never leave that circle. And
let's
be
go
in
to a Fryfogle moment is what I'm going to call it, where if you're disconnected from the world, you're easily able to be controlled by your government.
I
no,
agree
why'd you
with
say
that.
government? We were so close.
A Fryfogle moment.
Let's say the establishment, which includes the
go.
government.
Establishment.
That's true. That includes the school district. No.
Big Pharma.
Big Pharma. Big Pharma runs Disney. I'm sure of it.
Well, but I mean,
no.
capital E establishment. I mean, you're not entirely wrong. I mean, there are certainly members of our society that exist at a high level that feed into our consumerism mindsets and into our wanting to be comfortable and not challenging ourselves, and we'll use that to their advantage to turn a incredibly large profit off of the backs of these industries. I mean, and that's not even necessarily their fault. There's a reason why the market has allowed them to do it, is because we as humans would rather be as comfortable as possible, I think, deep down. And I think all of us have certain levels of knowing ourselves and self-awareness to know when we need to challenge ourselves to be productive. But if, I think deep down, we all just want to be as comfortable and have everything catered to us as conveniently as possible. And in our pop culture and in our society, there's an incentive to feed into that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I mean, if you, and I'm not an advocate for social Darwinism, but reproduction and eating are probably two of the biggest human drives on the face of the planet. So, I mean, if you satisfy those, right, that's like 50% of the equation. But I don't think that's the extent of the human, ambition and drive but I see what you're saying, and I get where you're going with that, and and then two, I wanted to respond because Justin was talking about, when we're talking about getting out of our comfort zone, is like how many of those industry twos where I've read about like benzodiazepines being contraindicated in trauma. So like people taking benzodiazepines for trauma are getting worsening trauma because the drug can impair the way that the stress response system works.
Here, take this pill, may cause depression.
How many of those industries manufacture catastrophes that then or like your
Solved
conflict
again by
of
the
interest.
next thing that they want you to take.
Yeah, conflict of interest there. There's a lot of. I understand where you're going with that, I think.
Well,
So who should be managing the medications if not Big Pharma? Hear me out. The Avengers.
Tying into that, Kurt, though, and we see the same thing in the homeless services field. There are, not going to name names, but there are organizations in the homeless services field whose primary goal is to receive funding and money, and they will manufacture or find ways to exacerbate a problem in the homeless services industry for the purpose of making sure that, industry is the key word there, right? But
I was just
that's
putting
like
an
that-
emphasis.
that-
That was just echoing you what you were saying. Go
That
ahead,
line
continue.
from The Dark Knight where Heath Ledger goes, "If you're good at something, never do it for free." Yeah,
we should review The Dark Knight next. I need to go back and watch The Dark Knight trilogy.
that's great.
That's true. That's a good one.
All right, guys, Isaac here again, just reminding you that 2 weeks from today's release date, we will have part 2 with Josh. This first episode, nothing too spicy. The next episode, we're going to be having a discussion about the roles of corporations in all facets of our society. So you know that is going to be a fascinating conversation that you're going to want to listen to. Until then, have a good rest of your day. Stay safe out there.